Hello everyone, wishing you a wonderful day. Today we're going to dive into a gripping story of love, loyalty, and survival as we uncover whether Jack and Tu Tien can overcome the company's financial collapse after serious bridge construction violations left them unable to even pay the bank interest. Will love be enough to carry them through their darkest chapter? If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next videos. After the meeting ended, Jack stood in the hallway for a few seconds, holding the signed contract in his hand. For the first time in many weeks, he felt like he could finally breathe. The partner that Tien introduced was not a small client. They were a major company with strong finances, a solid reputation, and most importantly, a real need for the services Jack's company could provide. If this partnership went well, it would not only bring in a large amount of revenue, but also open the door to more serious business opportunities in the future. For Jack's company, this contract came at the perfect time. The cash flow had been tight. Several projects had been delayed. Salaries, office expenses, vendor payments, everything had been putting pressure on him. Every day, Jack walked into the office with a calm face, but inside, he was counting numbers nonstop. How much could they pay this month? How long could they keep going? Which department could be reduced without making everyone panic? But now, with this contract in hand, the situation had changed. Not completely, but enough for people to see hope again. When Jack returned to the office, the employees quickly noticed something different about him. His expression was still serious, but his eyes were brighter than before. He called a short meeting and announced that the company had officially secured a major partnership. At first, the room was silent. Then one person started clapping. Soon, the whole meeting room filled with applause. Some employees smiled in relief. Others looked at each other as if they had just escaped a storm. For them, this was not just a business deal. It was a sign that the company might survive. Jack looked at everyone and said in a steady voice, "This is not the end of our difficulties, but it is a very important beginning. We still have a lot of work to do, and we cannot afford to make mistakes. But if we stay focused, this project can help us recover." Everyone nodded. They trusted him, and that made Jack feel even heavier, because deep down he knew there was still something he had not told them. The company had just gotten a lifeline, but Jack's personal financial situation was still a mess. Before Tien appeared and introduced him to this major partner, Jack had been desperate. He had wanted to find a fast way to bring money back into the company. He thought that if he invested in the right opportunity, he could generate quick returns and use that money to cover the company's problems. That was when he got pulled into several so-called investment projects. At first, they looked promising. The presentations were professional. The people behind them spoke with confidence. They used words like high growth market, exclusive access, early stage advantage, and guaranteed return. They even brought up technical terms like niche, making the whole thing sound more advanced and carefully calculated. Jack was not a careless man, but pressure can make even intelligent people ignore warning signs. He had checked some documents, asked a few questions, and convinced himself that the risk was acceptable. He told himself that every big opportunity came with uncertainty. He told himself that he was doing it for the company. So he invested, not once, but several times. And now, those projects were starting to look like scams. The people once answered his calls quickly had become difficult to contact. The updates became vague. The promised payments were delayed again and again. Every time Jack asked for a clear timeline, they gave him another excuse. The system was being upgraded. The legal process was being reviewed. The funds were temporarily frozen. The market needed more time. At first, Jack wanted to believe them, but now he knew better. He had made a mistake, a serious one. That night, after everyone left the office, Jack stayed behind alone. The lights outside the building glowed through the glass windows. The city was still moving, but inside his office, everything felt strangely quiet. He opened his laptop and reviewed the numbers again. The new contract would help the company stabilize over the next few months. If the team delivered well, they could receive the first payment soon. That payment could cover salaries, some debt, and urgent operating costs. But the money Jack had put into those scam projects was still missing. And worse, some of it had come from personal loans. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. For a moment, he felt angry at himself. How could he have fallen for it? How could he, someone who had built a company from nothing, someone who had negotiated with investors, clients, suppliers, and banks, end up trusting people who now looked like obvious fraudsters? But guilt did not solve anything. He needed a plan. Just as Jack was lost in thought, his phone lit up. It was a message from Tien Time. Are you still at the office? Jack looked at the screen for a few seconds before replying. Yes. A few moments later, she responded. I thought so. Jack gave a tired smile and died. Nye was always sharp. She did not need too many words to understand what was happening. She had helped him secure the contract, but she probably also knew that his worries had not disappeared. About 20 minutes later, Tien Time arrived at the office. She walked in with her usual calm expression, wearing a simple but elegant outfit. She did not look surprised to see the documents scattered across Jack's desk or the cold cup of coffee beside his laptop. She sat across from him and said, "You should be celebrating tonight." Jack looked down at the signed contract and replied, "I know, but you're not." He did not answer immediately. Tien studied his face. The contract solved one problem, but not all of them. Jack let out a slow breath. That obvious? To me, yes. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Jack finally said, I made some bad investments before this. I thought I could turn things around quickly. I thought I was taking calculated risks, but now I think I was just desperate. Tien did not interrupt him. Jack continued, there were several projects. They looked legitimate. The people were convincing. They had documents, numbers, market analysis, everything. But now they keep delaying payouts. Some of them are not answering at all. Sign at Time's expression became more serious. How much did you invest? Jack hesitated. The number was not something he wanted to say out loud, but hiding it would not change the truth. He told her. Tien Nun remained silent for a moment. Not because she was shocked, but because she was thinking. That is not a small amount, she said. I know. Was any company money involved? Jack immediately shook his head. No, I never use company funds directly, but I borrow personally, and if things go badly, it will still affect me, and eventually, it could affect the company. Time nodded. At least he had drawn one line. That mattered. She leaned forward slightly and said, Jack, listen carefully. The contract we secure today can help your company, but it cannot become a shield for your personal mistakes. You cannot use the company's recovery to cover everything quietly. If you do, one problem will become two. Jack looked at her. Her words were direct, but not cruel. That was what made them hit harder. I know, he said. I just don't know what to do next. Tien opened and had one of the folders on his desk and glanced at the papers. First, you need to separate the problems. Company operations are one issue. Your failed investments are another. Do not mix them emotionally, financially, or legally. Jack listened carefully. Second, she continued, you need to gather every document, every transfer record, every message, every contract, every name connected to those projects. Not tomorrow. Not next week, tonight. Jack frowned. You think there's still a chance to recover the money? I don't know yet. Tien said honestly. But if these are scams, time matters. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. Jack's eyes darkened. He had been avoiding this step because gathering the evidence meant admitting fully that he had been fooled. But Tien was right. Avoiding the truth would only make things worse. She looked at him and added, and one more thing, you need to prepare yourself emotionally. People who run scams do not only take money, They also manipulate shame. They make victims feel too embarrassed to speak up. That silence protects them. Jack stayed quiet. Those words hit something deep inside him. Because he had been ashamed. He had not told his team. He had not told his family. He had barely even admitted it to himself. Ly Tu Tien stood up and walked toward the window. The city lights reflected in the glass, making her silhouette look calm but distant. "Today, you gained a chance to save your company," she said. "But now, you have to decide whether you are brave enough to save yourself too." Jack looked at the contract on his desk, then at the investment documents. Two different paths were now in front of him. One path was about rebuilding the company. The other was about facing the consequences of his own choices. And Jack understood something clearly. The biggest battle ahead was not just business. It was the truth. He took a deep breath, opened a new folder on his laptop, and began collecting every piece of evidence. For the first time, he stopped pretending the problem would disappear. And somewhere in the silence of that office, the next chapter of Jack's life quietly began. A few days later, Jack began to see the first real changes inside the company. The new project with the major partner was moving smoothly. The client was satisfied with the team's performance, and the first results were better than expected. For the employees, this was more than just work. It was proof that the company still had a future. But Jack did not allow himself to become careless again. Every expense had to be reviewed. Every decision had to be discussed. Every project had to be based on real value, not hope or emotion. He gathered the management team and said, "From now on, we will not chase easy money. If an opportunity sounds too perfect, we will question it carefully. We will grow slowly if we have to, but we will grow safely." The team understood that something had changed in him. Before, Jack had always been ambitious and fast-moving. He was willing to take big risks if he believed the reward was worth it. That mindset had helped him build the company, but it had also nearly destroyed him when pressure pushed him into the wrong investments. Now, Jack was different. He was still determined but calmer. He no longer wanted a miracle. He wanted a strong foundation. Meanwhile, the scam case continued. With the help of Turk and Tai and the legal consultant, Jack and the other victims collected more evidence. They discovered that the scammers had used fake company addresses, fake names, and repeated scripts to attract investors. Many victims had been tricked the same way. Some had lost their savings. Some had borrowed money from friends or family. Others were still too ashamed to tell anyone. Jack felt guilty when he heard their stories, but he also felt more determined. He could not change what had happened, but he could help bring the truth to light. One evening, Jack received a call from the legal consultant. "We've traced several accounts connected to the transfers," the consultant said. "It's not enough to guarantee recovery, but it's a good start." Jack closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. For the first time, there was a small sign of progress. After the call, he sat quietly in his office. On his desk were two folders. One was for the new partnership. The other was for the scam case. Both represented a different part of his life. One showed the path forward. The other reminded him of the mistake he had to face. At that moment, time walked in. "You look serious again," she said. Jack smiled faintly. "I think I'm always serious now." "That's not a bad thing," she replied. "As long as you don't let fear control you." Jack looked at her. "Do you think I can really fix all this?" Tai did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Maybe you can't fix everything, but you can fix the way you move forward. That matters more." Her words stayed with him. Jack had been so focused on recovering what he lost that he forgot something important. Even if the money never came back, he still had to rebuild his life, his company, and his judgment. The next week, the major partner requested another meeting. Jack was nervous at first. He thought there might be a problem with the project, but when he arrived, the client's representative smiled and said they were impressed with the company's work. They wanted to expand the partnership. Jack listened calmly, but inside his heart was pounding. This was exactly the kind of opportunity his company needed. But this time, he did not rush to agree immediately. He asked clear questions. He reviewed the terms carefully. He discussed the workload with his team before making promises. Noticed this and later said, "You handled that well." Jack replied, "I'm learning not to say yes just because I'm afraid of losing a chance." That single sentence showed how much he had changed. The expanded partnership brought even more stability to the company. Slowly, the fear that had been hanging over the office began to disappear. Employees became more confident. Clients began to trust the company again. Jack's reputation, which had almost been damaged by his financial stress, started to recover. But Jack did not hide the lesson from his team. At an internal meeting, he spoke honestly. In business, pressure is unavoidable. But pressure should never make us abandon our principles. We will make decisions based on facts, not panic. If we don't understand something, we stop and ask. If we see risk, we face it early. No one knew every detail of his personal losses, but everyone could feel the truth behind his words. Later that night, Jack stood by the office window, looking at the city below. Tien stood beside him. "You're not the same person as before," she said. Jack nodded. "I hope not. You're stronger." Jack thought for a moment, maybe, but not because I didn't fall. Because I finally stopped pretending I hadn't. "Stay." Nod, Tien smiled. That was the real turning point. Jack still had debts to pay. The scam case was still ongoing. The future was not completely safe. But he was no longer running from his mistakes. He had chosen responsibility. And with that choice, everything began to change. From that day on, Jack built the company differently. He created stricter financial rules. He required proper review for all investment decisions. He made sure no one in the company would ever risk everything for a short term. Again, but the road ahead was still long. But Jack was no longer looking for a fast escape. He was building a future that could last. And this time, every step he took was slower, wiser, and stronger.